I was recently given the amazing opportunity to visit the beautiful city of Bamberg, Germany, home of the rock beer. I loved all the beers I had there, but in particular, I fell in love with the smoked Marzen. It was just so complex, so deep, sweet, malty, but overwhelmed in the best possible way by smoky characteristics like smoked ham and beef jerky. It was amazing. And this inspired me to brew my own. But I wanted to be a little bit more immersive. I didn't want to just buy smoked malt. I wanted to smoke my own. So today we're going to talk about how to smoke your own malt. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks I learned along the way, as well as the benefits of smoking your own malt as opposed to buying it. So let's get into it. The first thing that you're going to have to do is set up your smoking rig. I found the best method for me is just to lay down a thin layer of tin foil for the malt to sit on. Initially, I was worried that it wouldn't get enough surface exposure to the smoke and it wouldn't really get infused as strongly as I wanted, but I guarantee that if you're doing it long enough and you're doing it the right way, you're just going to completely infuse all your malts with the most beautiful smoky characteristic. And just like any other smoke session, you're going to want to have your cool pan in there. That's going to help control the climate and provide a much needed moisture. And speaking of climate control, the most important thing that you need to focus on is temperature control. The ideal temperature I found is around 120. If it gets any hotter than that, you run the risk of scorching or burning your malt, and that's going to leave a nasty acrid character in the final product that you just don't want. So try to use as few coals as you can to 1, power your system, and 2, ensure that it doesn't get too chaotic and too hot. And lastly, I recommend using a cold smoke system. That is going to be your best safeguard against getting temperatures too hot while also giving the maximum exposure to smoke. I do believe you could use any smoker or even set up a traditional grill as a smoker for meats and vegetables, but I find that the temperature control is much more difficult to master than a cold smoke setup. However, if you don't have a cold smoke setup, I will leave a couple links down in the description below that will teach you how to be able to convert or modify some of your more traditional grills into cold smoke setups. When you go to add your malts, try to distribute them as evenly as possible. This is going to allow the best exposure and the most consistent smoke infusion. I recommend going no thicker than an inch tall pile, but really consistency and maximum exposure is key here. So do the best you can with the setup you can, even if you have to do multiple batches and stay out on the smoker a little bit longer. Now I started off with my base malts, but I'm also going to smoke my specialty malts. I wasn't too worried about getting too overwhelming of a smoky characteristic because that's kind of what I was going for. But one thing you do have to watch out for is your specialty malts are already toasted a little bit longer, so they're already a little bit deeper and they're easier to burn. So just kind of keep a vigilant eye on them and make sure things don't get a little too chaotic. Once your charcoal is burned down to some ashy embers, this is when you want to add your wood. This is actually my favorite part. It's the best part about smoking your own malts because traditionally at most homebrew stores, you're only going to be able to find a couple different smoke variants in your malt, such as beechwood or some peat smoke, but when you're smoking it yourself, you're able to use anything you want to get as deep, rich, or unique characteristics out of it that you desire. I'm using some whiskey smoked oak chunks, but you can use anything you want, pecan, applewood, whatever. And that leads me to my next bit of advice. Try to have as much wood on hand as possible. This is a long, slow process and it's very easy to run out of wood. In fact, I ran out halfway through my second edition, so I had to kind of switch over to some applewood and some hickory. Initially, I was a little bit miffed about this, but once I was able to experience that deep, complex, smoky characteristic that multiple woods provided, I was immediately hooked and I fell in love with the whole process. But now that you got everything set up and you got your wood smoking, all there is left to do is just close it up and let it do its thing. You're going to want to let it smoke anywhere between 30 minutes to around 2 hours, but that really depends on you and how much smoky characteristic you want to infuse into your malts. Obviously, the longer you let it sit, the deeper and stronger the smoky characteristics are going to be. Every hour or so, I would open up the smoker and just kind of give it a little bit of an eyeball check. If I noticed that the malts were a little too dry, I would give it a quick spritz with some whiskey that I had in my spray bottle. You can use anything you want. You can use water, apple juice, beer if you want to get real meta with it. Just try to keep them a little bit moist. You don't want them soggy or anything, but if they dry out, your risk of them getting scorched or burnt goes dramatically up. And once you're done and satisfied with how smoky they are, just remove them from the grill and apply them directly to your mash tun like I did. You don't really need to worry about them continuing to cook like you would food. They cool down pretty quickly. The only thing I would say here is I tried to give them a couple sniff tests coming out of the mash tun, and I was surprised to find that I wasn't getting anywhere near the smoky characteristic that I was looking for. However, I realized later during the mash and the boil process, when my whole house smelled like beef jerky, that what had actually happened is I had kind of gone nose blind while I was sitting out there on the smoker for so long. So don't worry about it too much if you're trying to get a good whiff of them immediately. You're going to need to let your nose kind of recover a little bit before you're able to get the true vibe and experience of it. But once you're done, I promise you that you are going to absolutely love the final product. The smoky character is going to come through so strong, and honestly, you're just going to feel a little bit more connected with this beer, a little bit more involved in the total process, just because you were there for every step of the way. This was honestly one of my favorite brew sessions I've ever had. It's a little bit more work, but it's certainly worth it. So thank you for watching, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little bit about this if you were interested in doing this yourself. And if you have any questions for me about my methods or my processes, please let me know. I would love to talk to you about this all day long. And if you want to find out how this beer turned out, consider subscribing. I will be releasing a video of this brew day in its entirety sometime in the future, but currently this smoked Marzen is aging on some whiskey chunks, so it might need a little bit longer to completely lager and condition and mellow out. So thank you very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. Remember, there's a story in every bottle, and that life is beautiful. Cheers.